And hello from the campus of Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We welcome you to today's SCI webcast, Software Acquisition Pathway, Ready, Set, Go. My name is Shane McGraw, the Outreach Team Lead here at the SCI, and I'd like to thank you for attending. We want to make our webcast today as interactive as possible. We will address questions throughout today's talk. And you can submit those questions in the YouTube chat area now, and we'll get to as many as we can. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today. Eileen Wrubel serves as the Technical Director of the Transforming Software Acquisition Practice and Policy Directorate here at the SCI. She's responsible for coordinating the strategic planning and tactical execution of SCI initiatives to power a bolder, faster, and more adaptive acquisition, modernization, and sustainment of software-enabled capability. Welcome, Eileen. All yours.
Thanks so much, Shane. And with me today is my good friend and colleague, Brigid O'Hearn. Brigid is a principal engineer here at the SCI and our software modernization policy lead. Brigid has done just about every software-related job that the Department of War has had over the years. And if you've ever built anything in the Air Force that involves software in particular, you probably know Brigid. My colleague Julie Cohen was supposed to join us today. Unfortunately, Julie's not able to be here because of some unforeseen circumstances, but we're going to hope to connect with her on a future installment. So with that, the gear that you pack is critical to mission success for every mission, and that's where the software acquisition Go Bag came from. So I want to welcome everybody to today's Go Bag discussion, Software Acquisition Pathway, Ready, Set, Go. A lot of the folks that we encounter as the policy is still relatively new, but obviously there is increasing emphasis on adopting the software acquisition pathway as the primary and preferred pathway for DOW systems. We still encounter a lot of folks who are very new to using the software pathway. A lot of the folks who are registered to join us for these webinars are brand new to the software pathway. And so that's where we're coming from today. The department has a series of administrative and programmatic entry requirements to launch a program onto the software pathway, and they're relatively straightforward. But what we're doing with Ready, Set, Go is rewinding before those administrative activities and really getting at setting you up for success and building ground conditions in your program to enable you to make those moves and understand the specifics that you need to put together and how your program should move forward before you declared the program onto the software pathway. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We recently, I think in mid-December, launched our brand new Software Acquisition Go Bag Tactical Guide, Software Acquisition Pathway, Ready, Set, Go. And so Shane is going to launch a polling question in the chat window so that we can get a sense for how many of you have had a chance to download and read the tactical guide. Don't worry, everything that we're talking about today, the links are going to be in the presentation and they'll show up in the chat. But Ready, Set, Go is really for anybody in a program office who's about to embark on a software acquisition pathway program or considering whether they should be transitioning their program onto the software acquisition pathway or launching it on the software acquisition pathway. As we said, most folks that we are encountering in the department and that are registering for our webinars are pretty well new to the software acquisition pathway. And so one of the other things that we've done, in addition to launching the tactical guide, is we did put together a handy sort of 101 level primer on the software pathway that consolidates and contextualizes a lot of the basic information about the pathway, what it's intended to do, and how the elements work together. Every single one of the Go Bag tactical guides begins with a handy iconography like you see on the screen now to help you figure out very quickly which of the guides and supplements in our materials are most relevant to the role that you hold. The user's guide that's also available on the website as part of the kit provides a handy key to all of the iconography, all of the terminology, and how we have the tactical guides set up so that you have a consistent experience throughout them and can easily find the information that you need. So as I said, today's conversation is primarily geared towards folks who are in program management office roles involved in software acquisition, where you're about to embark on or are considering launching a program onto the software pathway. For programs that aren't yet an official program, we will be releasing soon a companion tactical guide called Cracking the CNS Code to help you in more detail reason about getting requirements for your program defined in the right way to be effective on the software pathway. So on that note, Brigid, let's start talking about ground conditions that need to be in place for a program to set itself up for success in launching a software pathway program.
All right. Thanks, Eileen. So I'll say, when we had people that registered, one of the registration questions were, hey, is there something that you'd like us to answer during the webinar? And one of the questions was, is there a checklist for how to know when you're ready to adopt the software pathway? And one of the things we're going to walk through here in a few minutes is really kind of considerations. I wouldn't call it a checklist. It's really considerations that a program office really needs to think about in terms of, hey, are these things we're doing today, or are these things that we really need to step back and get right before we adopt the pathway? So the first kind of consideration is, have you instilled an agile culture throughout the program office that includes users? I cannot stress enough how important having an agile culture is in terms of adopting the software pathway. I've had lots of programs say, oh yeah, my contractors follow an agile, we'll be good. That's not enough. It is not enough, right? The program office really has to be structured. When I say structured, I don't mean organizationally, but it needs to be structured in a way that they are really moving toward making sure that they have their users involved, that they're really pushing decision making down to the lowest level, that they learn as they go, not waiting for the perfect solution or all the answers before moving forward, but really have started to bring that agile culture into the program office, not just into the software development piece of it. I'll also mention in the tactical guide that Eileen talked about, the Ready, Set, Go tactical guide, we have some resources. So if you're working with a program and you're thinking, I don't quite think we're there yet, this isn't going to solve everything, but there's some really nice resources that we've added into the tactical guide that gives you a little bit more than you may have really thought about. There's even some Warfighting Acquisition University courses out there. There's some Agile primers. There's quite a few things that we pulled together. But this is a really important piece of trying to make sure that the program is ready for the software pathway. So the next one that we want to think about is, what's your plan to use agile methods in a DevSecOps environment? So again, the program may be, well, yeah, we're using agile methods in the contractor. And well, some of the contractors have moved to DevSecOps, but not all of them. So use of agile in DevSecOps is a requirement for the pathway. It is in the policy. So you really need to make sure that that is a consideration. Maybe you're really early in the program and you haven't even, you don't even have your RFP yet. That's fine, right? Those are things you need to think about, how you're going to build it into your contract. Maybe you've got an organic organization that you're working with, making sure that that is a consideration. Or maybe the program office wants to have their own DevSecOps environment that their vendors are going to use. Those are just things you really need to think about. You don't have to solve it all, but you really need to think about how you're going to build that in. All right, on to the next one.
So involved, knowledgeable users are absolutely going to be your program's superpower on the software pathway. One of the administrative artifacts, governance artifacts required by the pathway is a user agreement, and we'll release a tactical guide on really getting into the meat of developing an effective and value-oriented user agreement in another session. But it's really important to, as you're beginning to consider the software pathway, get a handle on how will we approach engaging users in a consistent and on a consistent and continuous basis, and understanding that we have the right users involved to be giving us feedback about what's valuable from a mission perspective, how we prioritize development activities, and give us feedback on the deployed system when we're looking through the value assessments that's required by the software pathway, to understand that we really are getting to exactly that sweet spot that is going to meet the user need. And so this is about your plans to build those relationships and structure the activities that you do in the program to engage the user representatives on an ongoing basis. And that's not just seeing somebody every 6 months and doing the value assessment, but how are you engaging users in prioritization of development backlogs? Are there opportunities for product and tool demonstrations along the way so that you can collect that feedback and act on it really on a continuous and incremental basis? But users aren't your only stakeholders.
Exactly.
Right?
The stakeholders that you want to also think about, like Eileen said, users are incredibly important. You also want to think about all of your test and certification authorities, right? So you want to bring them in as early as possible. Your government developmental tests, operational tests, your cybersecurity team, you've got to get them involved early. And when you do that, you want to make sure they are as involved as they can be. You never want to wait until you're thinking, oh, I'm a month out from delivering software, and now let me go talk to those folks and give them 20 pounds of documentation to review. That's not going to work well. You want to get them involved as early as possible, even pre-RFP, if at all possible, so that you can make sure you build those tests and cybersecurity requirements into your contracts. If you can't, that's okay, right? You have an opportunity to be able to work with them. Make sure you get your test plans right. Make sure you put the right requirements for things like zero trust on your vendors, making sure that you've got those things really planned out early and having them as involved as they're able to be. I've worked with programs that they actually pay for travel for the test team. They pay to make sure the test team is at their Agile program planning events, at their demos, not official tests, but demos, right? Making sure that they, as often as they can be involved and understand what you're trying to produce and the pace at which you're trying to produce it, make sure they really understand that. Again, you never want to wait until the end to have them do those activities. And if you can give them access to your DevSecOps environments or your SharePoint sites or your team sites where you're putting your documents, you have all of the artifacts that they need, making sure that they are as involved as they can be. That's a real key.
Designing that information flow, there's communication loops into the process so that they can see things being built up incrementally and see those bodies of evidence build incrementally is a fundamental part of that.
Exactly. And so, if you're an embedded system, you're going to have things like system safety, you're going to have your airworthiness teams. If you've got a program that involves a nuclear component, there are additional requirements that, again, you just cannot wait until the end. You've got to make sure they understand what you're doing and how you're doing it, and they're as involved as they can be very, very early on, because you don't want to wait until the last minute to build artifacts and you think, oh, if I had known that early on, I could have automatically built some of those artifacts. I've seen programs actually use their Jira boards to tag in things that have airworthiness or nuclear impacts to make it easier to find and produce artifacts later. Those are just things that if you think about them early, you can build it in and make it much easier for you on the back end.
Document once and use many times.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly.
And then one other key to readiness that we talk about a lot is, at the end of the day, if you have to be able to provide new functionality at least annually on the software pathway, you have to be releasing capability at least annually. And so for non-embedded programs, right, that's annual deployments of software capability into the hands of users. And on embedded programs, we're talking about demonstrating capability in an operationally relevant environment where, again, you can get that user feedback, but that could look something like a hardware in the loop lab or other kind of environment, because we do recognize that it is a little bit more complicated to actually put software on an aircraft than it is to put it on on your laptop distributing a business system or a C2 system, over a network.
So Eileen, I wanted to mention there was actually a comment in the chat
Right.
where somebody said, hey, this isn't just about the program office, right? It's about the contract, the industry program manager, your contracting officer. Absolutely. This is specifically what we're talking about here. These are decisions that a program office needs to make, but it doesn't mean these other organizations aren't involved. I mentioned earlier, right? Like what you decide to do with your Agile and your DevSecOps environments, those are conversations that happen with your contractor, your vendor. Those are things that have to be built into your contract. And so, yes, absolutely. All the things we're talking about go way beyond a program office. But these specific 7 questions are really about how does the program office assess whether or not they're ready to adopt the pathway. And I'll mention here too, as a program office looks at these, you really want to try to make sure you have at least thought about how you're going to handle all 7 of them. But you don't have to meet all 7 of them before you adopt the pathway. You've got the planning phase in which you can actually address some of these things. I will say, though, number 1, the Agile culture is so important that we recommend, if you have not instilled that you really back up and think about how you're going to do it and begin to put it into place before you adopt the pathway. It's just such a crucial part. It's something you just can't miss. I have honestly seen programs that have adopted the pathway and then 1 or 2 years later have moved back to the pathway that they were on because they weren't ready. They did not have that Agile culture built in, and they needed to step back and do things differently before they were ready to go forward again.
All of the rhythms about delivery, all of the user engagement, all of the early and continuous participation from your certification authorities, your other stakeholders, all of that rides on that Agile foundation that is cooked into the way the software pathway is built.
Yes, exactly.
So it's probably a good time to check. Are there any other questions that we have in the chat before we move on to Am I Set?
Yeah, we got one, Ken just asking, it seems like many of the traditional planning documents, STPs, CDRLs, et cetera, are not referenced in the go bag. Is this information not needed or does it end up in the backlog, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the software pathway does not require a software development plan as one of its artifacts. However, that does not mean that your program can't have a software development plan. We recommend that they do, right? Especially if you've got multiple vendors, you've got multiple pieces, you've got interoperability concerns, you're really going to want to make sure you have a software development plan. We don't mention that in the Go Bag resources yet. Doesn't mean we won't, but that's not a requirement of the pathway policy to have that. Seadrills are things that you're definitely going to make sure you're going to want to use the right seadrills depending on how you're going to execute the software. I've seen programs that, hey, I want source code delivered, and some it's, hey, I've got my own. The program has their own DevSecOps environment, and that is the source of truth. And so there's no delivery of source code. So the program really has to think about the way in which they're going to execute, and then use those seadrills in the right way. We are going to have some other tactical guides that will talk about how to get the right things on contract, the kinds of seadrills you might want to use in the program. It's not in this particular tactical guide, but it doesn't mean we won't have more in the future. So there are some more traditional artifacts that programs typically think about having that, again, are not required by the pathway, but it doesn't mean you can't use them. You can tailor it in the way that makes sense for your program. Again, there's so many different ways in which you can do it. We're talking about what the policy requires here.
Yeah, and then that tailoring things in a way that makes sense for you to actually execute in the environment that you're in. That's what building out the Go Bag is really intended to help get at, is contextualizing the things specific to your mission requirements, your users, and then being able to design and build and execute your program in the way that's going to get you to those desired mission outcomes. So it was a really good question. It's a good question.
Very good.
So before we move on then to Am I Set? At the beginning of the session, Shane launched a polling question about how many folks have had the chance to download and read the Ready, Set, Go tactical guide. How are we doing there?
70% no, 30% yes. And the link is in the chat now.
Yeah. Great, thanks. The 30% of you that had a chance to review that before the holiday, before the winter holidays and everything, fantastic. I'm really eager to get some feedback from you on how you found that. And for the rest of you, again, I hope that I hope that after this session, you'll have a chance to visit it, and give us your thoughts and use some of these tools in your programs. So let's talk about getting set. As Brigid said, we talked through those readiness considerations for program offices, and she mentioned this pretty specifically, that the installation of that Agile culture is really foundational. If you aren't there yet, if you aren't prepared to make decisions in an iterative and incremental way and start building those structures for continuous engagement for your users, leaning into Agile and DevSecOps approaches. That's a pause point. And there's tons of great resources available from the department. There's tons of great resources available in our tactical guide, but that's really, as I said, that's built into the structure, that the policy rides on. And so you really want to be prepared to engage in that way before you move forward. But now that we'll assume now that you've got those 7 considerations under control, and you're a new program entering the software acquisition planning phase. What do you need? It's really straightforward from an administrative and programmatic perspective to position a program on the software acquisition pathway. It requires that you develop a draft capability needs statement, which is a high-level description of warfighter needs. You have the ability to revise this during the planning phase and should expect to revise it during program execution. But this is not your father's requirements document. This is really a description of the mission outcomes that you're trying to enable, more than specific kind of technical designs and all the shall statements that we're used to in legacy requirements documentation. As I mentioned earlier, one of our upcoming tactical guides is going to be on cracking the code for developing a really effective CNS, for helping you to prioritize, make those mission trade-offs, engage with all of your stakeholders, and communicate about what you're building and why, and track against it. So the second thing that you need to do is, once you have that draft CNS, you'll meet with your decision authority. You'll talk about your plan for the program on the software acquisition pathway. And once you obtain approval from that decision authority via a documented acquisition decision memorandum, then you contact ANS to register the program. It really is that straightforward. There's the instructions for that are in the tactical guide, and they're also on the Adaptive Acquisition Framework website. And that's really it. You don't have to wait for subsequent approval or permission from the Pentagon. Once you've got that approval from via your acquisition decision memorandum and you register the program, you're on the pathway and you're good to go. Assuming, remember, that you've got those Agile principles established and that you have started to do the planning for those other considerations. But all you really need to launch your program on the pathway is that draft CNS, that acquisition decision memorandum, and registering the program. But so what if you're an existing program and you're trying to transition some or all of your software to the software pathway? Things open up a little bit here. Brigid, I would love for you to talk about this.
Yeah, so, again, the CNS and the ADM are the keys to transitioning to the pathway. However, an existing program may already have a requirements document that will work for entering the pathway. And so what we recommend is take a look at your requirements document. Maybe you've got a CDD, maybe you've got another requirements document. We've seen quite a few different types. Take a look at it and determine whether or not that might work as entry into the pathway. Eileen has mentioned a couple of times the tactical guide that's coming out next called Cracking the CNS Code. It's actually going to talk through how to look at your existing requirements document and determine whether or not it might be enough to get you on the pathway, or whether or not you really might want to step back and go, okay, you know what? This is just way too detailed for us to be able to use on the pathway in a way that's going to be productive. And so in that case, you might want to go ahead and build your draft CNS. And again, you know, as you're looking at it with your users and really thinking through, hey, we're going to be on the pathway now. How are we going to do things differently? You'll be able to take a look at that and determine, yeah, I think we can use it. Maybe we use, you know, the higher level requirements versus the super low level detailed requirements. So again, you need that CNS or existing requirements document, and you're going to need an acquisition decision memo. This one's going to be a little bit different. It's going to have different content than the one Eileen talked about. For a new program, it's going to say, hey, this new program is now, you know, in the planning phase. For an existing program, it's going to say this program is transitioning from whatever it is. Maybe it's the major capability acquisition. Maybe it's, you know, middle tier of acquisition. It's going to say you're transitioning from this particular pathway into the software pathway. And it's going to give you potentially maybe, you know, some amount of time for transition. It's going to give some details in which that transition will happen. So it's a little bit more of a detailed acquisition decision memo. The determination of that is really, you're going to have to meet with your decision authority and understand what's going to work best for your program. And that's going to be what gets documented in that ADM. So again, CNS or an existing requirements document plus that ADM is what you're going to need to transition if you're an existing program. So let me talk a little bit about a myth that we've heard a lot from different programs. So we've had many programs say, hey, I am an existing program that's, let's say, their middle tier of acquisition. And because I'm already executing in middle tier of acquisition, I've got to go straight into the execution phase of software pathway. And one of the things we actually recommend to programs is maybe you actually do have a planning phase. You can do that formally or informally. It's really something you need to talk to your decision authority about and decide the best way in which to do that. But you really do want to have some time to think about how you're going to transition from one pathway to another. So a lot of programs think, well, if I'm executing an MTA and I go to planning and software pathway, then I can't deliver anything. That's not true. That's not true at all. You can continue to deliver while you're working out your planning, trying to, maybe you're going to execute some different contracts. Maybe you're going to, again, step back and do a little bit more work on building that agile culture. Those are things that you really need to think about in that transition. Is it wise to just go straight from one pathway to another? And the thing that might make you step back and say, I think I need a little bit of a planning phase, is Eileen talked about it when we were, you know, talking through the considerations. Programs have to deliver annually. So if you go from MTA and execution straight to software pathway and execution, you've got to make sure you're ready to execute and deliver annually. If you're not, that might be a pause moment for you to go, let me go to planning so that I can work out my processes, so that I can get the right things or update my contracts and make sure I'm really ready, so that when I hit the ground running, I can deliver in a year. So that's really things to think about for an existing program. Plus that myth, we love this little this little unicorn icon. You're going to see it a lot in our tactical guides. So you'll see us dispelling myths as we go along. And these are just lessons learned and things that we've learned along the way with different programs that we've worked with.
And, you know, Brigid, I think that flexibility that really is built in so that a program can transition onto the software pathway, but have the opportunity to enter via the planning phase or the execution phase. It's a really important aspect of the policy as written, right? To know that we are going to try to transition software into this very software focused, software centric, software first acquisition pathway. So having the structural mechanism, having the flexibility in the policy to be able to evaluate the conditions in a program and enter at the point that makes sense to set up best for success. I think it's really, really an important part in the environment, and I'm glad that we have that flexibility, and we're doing a lot of work. I think we're going to see more in our future tactical guides, maybe a little bit deeper help for folks that are evaluating how to more effectively make some of those transitions and develop those transition plans for in-execution programs.
Yeah, really great point, Eileen. And I'll mention here too, there's no minimum amount of time that you have to be in planning. We've seen some, the pathway wants you to get from planning to execution as quickly as the program is ready to. We've seen some programs 6 months. We've seen some that go a little bit longer. And one of the reasons that we've seen a few programs go a little bit longer in that planning phase is because they felt the need to actually build a prototype to make sure they knew they were ready. So again, that tailorability in the software acquisition pathway really can help your program. We just want program managers to think through what works best for their programs and do whatever that is that works best. And of course, you're going to need to run that by your decision authority, but there is a lot of flexibility in allowing you to either take a little bit more time, or in a transition for an existing program, you can have a short, planning phase just to make sure you've got everything ready to go.
And transitioning those technical practices too, just as much as anything else. If we're moving to new development environments or changing our communication and workflows with our different stakeholders, really nailing all of that so that you hit the ground running in the execution phase.
Exactly.
So we talked about programs starting on the software pathway. We talked about programs that are existing programs. Now let's talk about programs that aren't yet programs.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a different situation. It's kind of funny because you tend to think there's so many programs in the Department of War. You think most of them are probably a program of record, but I've actually run across quite a few in my career that were not yet a program of record. They were some kind of a prototype. They were working through it. They just hadn't, gotten to the point where they had become a program of record. And so this is a little bit of a nuance for the pathway, because in this case, if you're not a program of record, guess what? You don't have a program office. There's no program office yet. And so in this case, it's typically the sponsor or the users that are actually working that kind of prototype. It started out as some kind of a need. There was some kind of a exploration of that need where they might have analysis of alternatives or like a capabilities-based assessment. They've got something that describes more than one sentence what they're looking for, what the need actually is. And so it's actually not that complicated to then take that and turn that into a draft capability need statement. And so that's what we recommend. Hey, there's no program office in this case, but the sponsor and user know what it is that they need. So have them go ahead and begin to build out that CNS. And so once they have that, then they can begin to work with a decision authority to, hey, this is what we need. This is the timeline in which we need it. There's funding for it, some kind of funding for the prototype, as it is working through to become a program of record. Working with that decision authority to then, okay, now that we understand what it is and how it's going to work, or have some kind of high level understanding, work with that decision authority to then get the program office assigned and built out. But in the meantime, the decision authority can, begin to work with the user sponsors on that CNS. They can begin to assign maybe a person or two to begin to work as they're standing up the program office. So it doesn't mean you can't be on the pathway just because you're not a program of record. You can begin to execute in that way. while the program office is standing up. So in the tactical guide, we've actually got a really neat little flow chart that kind of walks through, here's what the users will do before the program office exists. This is how the decision authority will work with the users and sponsors. And then once that program office is stood up, how things can transition, how they can begin to take responsibility, and then how that program office can then begin to move the program once it's stood up from the planning phase into the execution phase. So that decision authority, we don't have it in the presentation, but really encourage people who might be in this place where they know they've got a program that's not yet a program of record, how that might work. So there's some details in the tactical guide I think will really help you all.
Yeah, that's really nice. I like the flow chart. So before we move on to let's go, I just want to stop and check with Shane and Brigid. Do we have any other questions from out there in internet land about am I set before we move on to moving on?
I don't think it was from this section, but one was should one of the PMO questions ask if there's a plan for ownership of data, etc. That was a little bit earlier, Eileen.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So there's not a question on that because it's not a consideration in terms of whether or not the program's ready to adopt the pathway or not. It is a consideration that the program office needs to have. And the program is going to do that as they're developing their acquisition strategy. They're going to think about, hey, right, we're going to have our own DevSecOps environment. We're going to have them work right within our environment. So there's no need to deliver source code because it's already going to be there. Or, hey, the vendor maybe has an existing system that we're going to use for some amount of time. Therefore, we need to, think through data rights, how the source code is going to be delivered. So those are considerations that are part of your acquisition strategy, but are not considerations for whether or not you're ready to adopt the pathway. There are lots of other considerations, right, that are going to go into that acquisition strategy. That was a really good question because it is incredibly important how you think about data rights, how you think about delivery of your source code or access to your source code. Those are things you need to think about, just not in terms of how or when you're going to adopt the pathway.
Thanks so much, Brigid. So we're ready. We're set. Let's go. Let's talk about what you need to move out.
Yeah, I really like this one. I really like the ready, set, go aspects of it because, we're giving you the considerations of, hey, here are all the things program office really need to think about, or user sponsor if the program office isn't set up yet. And then making sure you've got that CNS and ADM. And this is just a really nice little summary. It's in the tactical guide as well that really talks through, okay, I'm a new program, I'm an existing program in planning, I'm an existing program in execution, or a new program of record. So again, it's a draft CNS and an ADM. It's not that is not really a ton of complicated artifacts. Somebody asked earlier about, hey, where are all these other artifacts? Those are not needed to adopt the software pathway. The CNS and the ADM are the things that you need to adopt the pathway. Once you're in that planning phase, then you're going to build out those other artifacts. We'll talk more about the other artifacts later, but these are just the simplistic ways to think about, I'm a new program, I'm existing, I'm not yet a new program of record, and what those things are that you're going to need. You're also going to, once you have all of these things, you're going to send an email to the Office of the Secretary of War for Acquisition and Sustainment. They're going to send you a registration form. You're going to send them the information. You don't need to wait for a response. You've got everything you need when you have your draft CNS and your ADM, and you can just move out. So you're ready to go. And it's actually a very simplistic way to adopt the pathway and submit everything you need and hit the ground running.
The administrative overhead, there was a lot of effort. And Brigid, I know you spent a lot of time working on the team that developed and did a lot of the initial work to engage with the community about adoption of the software pathway. There was a lot of attention paid to making sure that the administrative overhead under rolling out programs and executing programs on the software pathway was reduced, minimized to really being what you absolutely need in order to make the decisions that you need to make to execute the program and understand if you're successful. And that carries throughout from the start of really how streamlined it is to launch a program onto the pathway.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what's next then? Brigid and I will be at the Weapons System Software Summit at the Department of War Maintenance Symposium next week in Phoenix. So for those of you in the community who are going to be at that event, it's a fantastic event every year. We are doing a 2-hour tutorial based on the material that we've talked about in Ready, Set, Go and that tactical guide on the Tuesday opening day. Brigid is also working with folks from DoD CIO to lead a panel on moving forward out of the state of DevSecOps study. And there's lots of great activity going on at the Weapons System Software Summit surrounding software pathway adoption and different kinds of programs. You'll hear from the policy owner as well. So there's more information on the symposium's website about the tutorial and also the tutorial that we're doing and also the overall program. And so we hope to see a lot of you there and get feedback from you. And then in terms of what's next for the Go Bag, again, the slides are of course going to be released when we release the recording. Shane's put a lot of the links in the chat. And we've got the QR codes. We really encourage everybody to visit the Go Bag website, send us your questions and your feedback about the webinar or about the tactical guides and the other assets, and whether maybe you've already put them to work in your programs. We would love to hear from you about that. You can subscribe to our mailing list to get notifications of new launches of new tactical guides and other resources in our webinars. And you can pack your own Go Bag by picking and choosing exactly the right things from our kits that are relevant to you in context. And we continue to work on developing tactical guides and hosting webinars and events like this based on the feedback that we get from you in the community, from folks who are doing this work in programs. That helps us prioritize and it helps us share. I don't even want to say lessons learned. It helps us share experiences and beneficial practices that we can all learn from. So if you have a story about something that you've done with the software pathway or successful tips or techniques that have really helped to help you to get to your mission outcomes on software programs and software pathway programs, we would also love to hear from you at that feedback link. But community feedback is what powers the Go Bag. So we're really excited to hear more from all of you and hope that you'll stay tuned for future webinars. Do we have any other questions before we head out, Shane?
So we had one comment I'll read, and another question. Comment was, what I've seen work for embedded software on very large aerospace programs is to do small scale development in the areas with the largest risk. This gives you early feedback while you are ramping up. Any comment to that?
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly concur. Brigid, I don't know if you want to weigh in. That's exactly what that agile mindset is getting at.
Exactly. That is the right approach. That we want to have that, prototyping or early feedback on those large areas of risk. There are lots of ways to run agile programs and lots of ways to prioritize. And I'm not a fan of weighted shorter job first, which some of you may be, because sometimes you want to tackle the big, meaty, risky one first to make sure you understand where those real issues are going to lie. And so doing that early on in an embedded program, absolutely agree.
And tackling those weighty issues too, that's what's going to constrain the design space that you have in the future, right? And if those buying down those big risk areas is going to neck down some of the other decision spaces, so you won't need to invest in them later. So that's absolutely the right approach. And I think you said there might have been.
Yeah, and then the last question we had, Eileen, says, I've been in the PMO on the 2 ACAT-1 programs. How does the SEI identify the risks associated with the prime's ability to scale from, for example, 25 people to 400 plus after contract award? Cognizant that after the contract award requirements, developments occur while not all subcontractors are on board. Sometimes it takes the ACAT-1 programs up to 18 months to get to the normal stage of the Tuckman model. Any comment there?
There is a lot packed into that. But absolutely, that's so there's a lot of complicated stuff tucked into that. But absolutely, I think what it's ultimately getting at is, okay, so I've released my RFP and I've selected the organization that we're going to work with, but they have to, because this is so big, we're relying on their plans, what they've stated as their plans for scaling technology and scaling the organization to be able to execute against the schedule. I think that's, Brigid, is that how you're reading the question as well?
Yeah, this one I will say, there is always risk, right, with scaling the number of people that are going to be your developers on a program. And it becomes even more complicated if they've got certain security requirements. They've got to get, they've got to get access to different classified systems. They're going to have a top secret, a special access. That adds a tremendous amount of risk. And it is always a risk to the program when you begin to see how that's scaling. I'm going to give a plug here. We talked about cracking the CNS code. We have another tactical guide that's in development called Pack Light, Measure Right, that is about what kinds of metrics and measures your program might want to track. This is one that I highly recommend, that programs track those resources, right? Those people that you need to scale up to be able to get to a certain level in your program. You're going to want to track whether or not they've gotten their clearances, whether or not they've gotten access to systems. That risk that's identified in that question, if the program office is tracking it, that's going to go a long way, because the program office often is one of the ones that have to help initiate some of those security clearances and other things. So there's often a collaboration that needs to occur. And if you don't have insight into some of those details, you're not going to get there quick enough. So that was a really great question. As Eileen said, there's a lot to unpack there, but that's the one focus area I would say is make sure you're measuring that, make sure you're tracking where that is, and have a way to work that with a contractor.
Yeah, there's a lot of, there can be a tendency to think about metrics in terms of how much code is written or where am I on this, like things that are important, but not include all of the business and technical practices that surround that. And so this is a fantastic example of the business and acquisition environment, the factors that are needed to be successful, and being able to make sure that you're monitoring, collecting data, and understanding what the data means as you're collecting it to know if you're on track or not. But thank you, Brigid, for the plug for the upcoming Pack Light, Measure Right. We're hoping we've got a great backlog, a great pipeline full of things here that we are working to put out there. And this is an excellent question for us as we're in the final review stage on Pack Light, Measure Right too. Fantastic. Do we have anything else that popped in at the last second, or do you think we're coming to
someone asked what I'm not familiar with this. Maybe you guys are. What happened to the software library efforts? Any familiarity with that, Brigid or Eileen?
Software library.
Software library efforts.
I'm not.
Yeah, I'm thinking. So there's Iron Bank, which programs can leverage some of the code that's been developed or certified. I will also say, back in the old days, we used to have something called a CPIN library. It was a computer program identification number library, where a program could go get something out of a software library, right? Existing code that's been delivered. I don't think those even exist anymore. I remember the big rooms full of disks and CDs and all kinds of stuff. But I'm not sure exactly what this question. That's my old school recollection of a software library. So I'm not sure where the question is going there.
I would invite the person who asked the question to go ahead and visit the SCI website, and there's a contact us on the GoBag webpage that comes directly to this team. And just send us an email with a little more information, and we can chit chat a little further on that.
Great.
Then we'll have all the right context.
Eileen, Brigid, great discussion today. Thank you both for sharing your expertise. We see your contact information on the slide now. We also like to thank you all for attending today. Upon exiting, we ask that you hit the like button below the video window and share the archive if you found value. Any question from today's event? Eileen mentioned there is a contact us form on the slide now that you can send questions right to the GoBag team. Again, thank you for attending. Everyone have a great day.
Bye all. Thank you.